On this week's episode of Where We Are, we're going to talk about the Great Dechurching, what it means for the church, what it means for America. You're listening to Where We Are. You're listening to Where We Are. We are the Wheres. I'm Michael.
I'm Melissa.
Melissa, it's we're now really into September. That means Buffalo Bills.
The Beals, yep.
The Buffalo Bills play Monday night against the New York Jets. It's very exciting. It also means fall is coming. Longtime listeners of the pod would know that you're not a huge fan of fall.
I'm not.
Although you like many things associated with fall, including apple cider donuts, including the girls dressed up in funny costumes, but something about fall, and we don't need to get into it here because it gets me very frustrated. Something about fall
sets me off.
Really sets you off. But I'm glad for it to be fall. There are a lot of things that need to happen in the fall, and I'm glad to just figure out how things go. I'm sick of waiting. You know, I need some questions answered. I need time to pass, and the fact that we're in September means that time is passing.
Yeah, time is doing its thing.
Yeah. Do you have anything profound to say about the nature of time, existence? Or?
No, but it sounded like you were about to go into like some kind of thing, and I was like, well, okay, Michael, go off.
I mean, I am feeling pretty reflective.
I was about to say, yes.
It is 1 a.m.
It is 1 a.m., yep.
On Sunday. Mm-hmm. So
we'll be releasing this episode in
the
next hour.
When you hear this podcast, it will be so fresh right out of the oven, you may burn your fingers. You may like blow on it first, so that it's because it's going to be hot off the presses. And why are we recording so late this evening?
Because we were at a very fun party earlier.
We were at a very fun party celebrating the marriage of Joshua and Michelle Dubois.
Their
Joshua
10-year anniversary.
10-year anniversary. Joshua and Michelle, longtime friends. Joshua was my boss back 2008 campaign, White House, colleague. We started businesses together. We've experienced a great deal of life together, and it was fun to see him and Michelle celebrate and be celebrated.
Yes.
With their babies.
Mm-hmm, their 3 babies.
And got to see just a whole bunch of folks that I just have not seen in way too long. So it was great, but what it meant was, because we had friends over for dinner Friday night, so we didn't record Friday night, and so we're recording the podcast at now 1:09 a.m. It was a great party. We got to do one of those photography things where the camera is on like a swivel and it goes around you.
It's 360. It's very high tech, and I did not understand it.
Yeah, but it was a cool experience. I felt like
I was on like E! News at like the Oscars where they do that camera zoom in slow-mo thing. Yeah, it felt very fun.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about a party? Anything you want to say about life generally, Melissa?
No, not really.
You have nothing on your mind. I mean, we got the girls in the preschool.
Yeah, no, the girls. Saoirse started preschool. Ilaria starts next week. It'll be her first time ever in any kind of school or care setting, and so I'm very interested to see how she reacts. But, you know, Saoirse had a great week last week, and she's just so excited. She loves school so much. But for the first time ever, for 2 days a week, for 3 hours each day, both children will be in school, and it'll be very strange for me not having them at home because I stay at home with them while I consult part-time and do the podcast and our Substack. So I'm about to hit a new era, like a hint of what it will be like when they're both in elementary school, which I've heard from many other parents who stay at home with their kids is like a new a new horizon.
Yeah. So that's going to be wild.
Yeah.
It definitely feels like a milestone in the parenting journey for real. You know, Melissa, I'm like in a sharing mood this evening. Like I have things on my
Okay.
mind.
All right. What does that mean?
It means television recommendation, which is
Ooh,
folks
yeah. Okay.
need to watch My Brilliant Friend on Max HBO. I just think it's so well done. If you're able to stick with subtitles, I'll be honest. I'm at the age where I can only do at most an episode and a half a night. But honestly, I've been doing a lot of like half episodes because following the subtitles, not being able to do anything else like while you're watching the show, man, I just get tuckered out. But it is a wonderful show. I'm interested if any of our listeners read Elena Ferrante's books. I just listened to my first Ferrante audiobook. Really liked it. I think I'm about to start the book of My Brilliant Friend. But yeah, I that's a recommendation that I would give. It is heavy content. It's a coming of age sort of story. I like watching it. Like if the girls are around because it's all subtitles, so so it's like if something something is happening that if it was in English, I wouldn't watch it around if the dialogue is a little too crass, but it's all in Italian, so that helps in the parenting season that we're in now too, because they can't read yet. and I'm gonna make sure they can't read until I finish the series. Thankfully for them, I only have 6 or 7 episodes left. Melissa, anything else before we get to the main topic? I mean, I kind of feel I'm willing to say anything. I'm willing to talk about any topic. Is there anything you want to share with our listeners?
I'm looking at you like, are you okay? Is this the 1 a.m.
This
like
is the 1 a.m. podcast. This is the time. This is
this is
like
the 1 a.m. giddiness, like the witching hour. You've got the zoomies.
all right, all right, all right. Okay.
The other show I can recommend is Severance. If you have Apple TV or you were wanting to get Apple TV, please watch Severance. It's been out for a while, but love that show. I keep on thinking about it.
Yeah, that's true. A really good show. Okay, let's get to the main topic for this episode, which is the Great Dechurching. First of all, gosh, Jim Davis, Michael Graham, they've just done a knock-up job with the PR. I mean, you're just seeing the Great Dechurching
Everywhere.
everywhere. The book, and also just like the phrase, like I think is just what people are going to call it now. Like that's a cool thing to be able to point at something, name it, and people are like, yeah, that's what we'll refer to it as. For those of you so this book came out last several weeks. Jim Davis is a pastor in Orlando. Michael Graham writes for TGC. Is the ED of the Keller Center. And they wrote this book, The Great Dechurching. Who's leaving? Why are they going? And what will it take to bring them back? Which covers the significant change in the American religious landscape where 40 million adults, 16% of adults in America today used to go to church but no longer do. They put this in context. Interestingly, and strikingly to say that what has transpired in terms of folks no longer attending church over the last 25 years is a religious shift that's about 1.25 times larger than the fastest period of growth in religious adherence, which was the 25-year period after the Civil War. This is consequential for the life of the church, consequential for America. I think they very helpfully are obviously focused on the evangelistic, the ecclesial, the missional sort of aspects of this, but they also cover some of the social, political, and even sort of the kind of economic sort of consequences of this change. They give 3 reasons, 3 factors, main factors, though they say there's a lot of room for nuance and there are a lot of, there are other things going on, but they give 3 factors for what drove the acceleration of dechurching in the 90s on. First, they say during the Cold War, the terms American and Christian were used synonymously. But after the Cold War, it became more culturally acceptable to be both American and non-Christian. And so sort of like the all the cultural pressure that existed during the Cold War, sort of the pressure valve was released. Second, there was fallout from an increasingly polarized religious right. And we've talked about this before. This is Robert Putnam and David Campbell did a lot to sort of put some academic weight behind this idea, but basically it's that because of a conflation between a certain kind of right-wing conservative politics and Christianity, then that had that sort of pushed people away, and people who thought, for instance, well, my politics aren't that, and if that's what Christianity is, then I must not be a Christian. Those kinds of things happen, and the formerly religious middle began to join those of the religiously unaffiliated. And then third, interestingly, this is less discussed, but I think it's right, the influence of the internet. So they say, even though the internet was only in 20% of American homes by 97, students had access in schools. In 94, the Internet Cafe was born, and the first internet connections in public libraries became available. Their analysis here is that for the first time, people could easily and regularly engage a wide range of worldviews vastly different from their own and collaborate in communities with others questioning their faith without the risk of social and familial opposition. So I think this is really interesting. Melissa, I have some thoughts, but would love to hear from you what you think about the general point and research of the book, and what you think about the subject generally.
Yes. So I think that this book really contributes to conversations around these issues, because it's one of the largest studies, commissioned on this question of, are people leaving the church? How many are leaving the church, or how many are no longer going to church? And what is it that they believe? Is that it gives us numbers. It's quantitative, and really appreciative of that fact. And Ryan Burge is also on the cover of this book because he helps provide that data to the authors. And I think we've all seen it, whether or not you have just recently become a Christian, or you became a Christian 10, 20 years ago, or you've been a Christian, since childhood, raised in the faith, is that you've probably noticed that your friends are no longer going to church, or that your congregation has changed quite a bit, or you're talking to your other friends and they've noticed these things. So it puts numbers to the hunches that maybe a lot of us have had. And so really appreciative of the fact that has really given us some evidence base with which to start these conversations, or honestly to continue these ongoing conversations. Because, Michael, you and I were just talking about how, with one of like the three major factors that they talk about since the 90s of, well, why does it look like this, is that there actually is quite a bit of discussion and research, books, scholarship out there on the religious right, the rise of it, how it became so powerful, what has come out of it. I mean, we recently had John Ward on the podcast talking about his book Testimony, as you know, one of the great contributions to that particular part of scholarship that, these authors sort of pinpoint as one of the three major reasons why our churches today look like the way they do and the trends look like the way that they do. So I'm really appreciative there. And I think that besides, the reviews out there, that this book has started some really interesting conversations between, various folks that we follow a lot of their writing on, like Jake Meador over in The Atlantic wrote about this book and his reaction and what he felt like was something that the church could do to sort of stem this decline, which is, churches being bold and asking folks to join, and to not just join the community, join the church, but to be deeply involved. And then Bonnie Christian over at Christianity Today had a response to Jake's piece saying, what if churches ask for people to be deeply involved and nobody answers, or nobody answers that call? So what happens then? So it's definitely been a conversation starter or continuer, I guess you could say.
Yeah, no, I thought those pieces were great, and we've seen the book get picked up in the Times, and
with with Jessica Groves, who we really appreciate.
Yeah, but I think several columnists picked it up, so it is driving the conversation. Yeah, here's
a couple. So I always get Christians hear about this data very differently from civic leaders and secular folks. And I think there needs to be an attentiveness to the different ways this conversation plays out. So, right, for Christians, particularly evangelicals, and folks that, like me, just want people to know Jesus, these numbers are staggering for what it reflects about the church's ability to reach people, about what it says about really like the state of our neighbors' souls and the spiritual health, and like all this kind of stuff. And that's why there's so much focus among Christians on this data. And there does need to be, like, this is a wake-up call for people who think that, like, things are going swimmingly, like with the American church. This book, again, should be a wake-up call. Just like, right, take out cultural impact, folks aren't going to church anymore. 40 million, like that's significant. That's staggering. I always do feel like I need to emphasize here, and sometimes I wish. Sometimes I want Christians to speak within knowing that others are listening in on the conversation, which is to say that, like, yes, staggering decline. America is still a profoundly religious nation. There's still many Christians in a way that is still exceptional in the West. And so, yes, we have this great dechurching, but as a cultural, political, social matter, I do know that like some secular folks, civic leaders, others, particularly those with like decision-making power, like hear this and they're like, "Whoa!" So if even the Christians are saying, our numbers are plummeting, that must mean they really are like on the way out. That must like really mean like, Christianity, religion generally, just not such a big thing anymore. And that's not the thing here. This is like very much like the conversation about this. It's one of those things of a confluence between Christians want to see every American in church, like an idea, like we want to reach as many folks as possible, and these numbers, this book, are striking in that way. But I did just like want to make the point that what it doesn't mean, the Great Dechurching doesn't mean that sort of religion's irrelevant, Christianity is irrelevant in this country. No, it's still driving the decisions of a significant percentage of American adults in this country. So that would be one thing I'd say. Second thing I'd say is another thing I like about the book is I think it rightly places, and what I liked about Jake's article is that it rightly places church attendance, even like theological, Christian practice, let me say, within a social context. When I think so often evangelicals want to say, well, look, we just need to like walk people down the Romans road, and they'll see it, and like their lives will change, and they'll go to church, and I have heard people say, and I wrote about this in the newsletter in my newsletter for the Center for Christianity and Public Life. You'll hear people say, the church really we need to clean up our own house. And what this book, what the Great Dechurching makes clear is that this isn't just a matter of sort of getting our theological T's crossed and I's dotted. If we're not cognizant of both the social, economic, cultural context in which we are in, and the way that context sort of affects the way people are hearing the gospel, the way people are thinking about the church. And on top of that, if we're not aware of the ways in which how the church is relating to these socio-political, cultural realities is then having an effect on missions and having an effect on evangelism, then we're just missing it entirely. Here are some stats from the Great Dechurching. 68% of dechurched evangelicals said their parents played a role in their decision to stop attending church. Here are the top 5 reasons they gave. 1, their emphasis on culture war lost me over time. 2, their lack of love, joy, gentleness, kindness, and generosity. 3, their inability to listen. 4, their inability to engage with other viewpoints. 5, their racial attitudes or actions. That says enough right there to suggest that like an evangelization strategy or approach, which is like, we just need to emphasize Romans more, or we just need to emphasize, this line of doctrine more. is not going to respond to the moment. It's not actually, it doesn't reflect that you're paying attention. And so those are two thoughts that I had as I've looked at this book, as we followed this conversation. One is there should be a wake-up call for the church. We also need to be aware of how others are hearing this conversation. And then two, there needs to be a real if this is going to be turned around from a practical sort of perspective, it's going to be because we respond with, yes, theological resources, and yes, with an apologetic. It's also going to require an attentiveness to people's lives as they're living them, the pressures they're facing, and how the cultural, political, social dynamics are playing into that. I guess, Melissa, the other thing I'd say, and this really came out in Jake's piece, was, and I thought this was so wise of Jake, and the way he described it was just so spot on, which is, like, a lot of people are not going to church because they have some, like, full theological objection. He gives the example in his New York Times piece of, his Atlanta piece of, parents with newborns, and just like and then the developed habit of not going to church through that season. He raises the person working 60, 75 hours a week, commuting 15 hours, and 2/3 of their waking hours are taken up with work. And so when they get to Sunday morning, they either try to get a little sleep that they can, or it's time to see friends or family that they haven't been able to see. And so I thought that sort of cognizance of the pressures that people are facing, and the fact that not every decision not to go to church, not every decision not to sort of is a frontal sort of rejection, and I think is a really, really helpful way to think about not just understanding the Great Dechurching, but how to potentially reverse it.
Yeah, when I read that part of Jake Meter's piece in The Atlantic, I thought immediately to the idea that since the 90s, with particularly if you're working in any sort of job which requires email or email access, which is a lot of jobs, not every job, obviously. There's lots of sectors that don't, but we know that we are constantly more connected to a lot of our vocations than we used to be back in like 1993 compared to 1983 compared to 1973, where a lot of our vocation is 24/7 now, and a lot of people wear multiple hats now in order to make ends meet. And so there's all sorts of factors like that have only become more profound in the last 25 to 30 years, which is when this dechurching has accelerated. That I think what you've just, pointed out, and what Jake is pointing out, it probably is affecting quite a bit. But I just want to make a probably not fully formed thought yet, but a comment, Michael, on the idea that Christians should be aware that when we're having conversations like this, of who's listening in and how we're presenting conversations like that. Because, yeah, I would say lately I have noticed, and for many, many good reasons, and a lot of the contributions are wildly constructive and needed and well done and all those things. But we have a lot of diagnoses right now for this dechurching issue. And obviously now we have this book with this, this major study really showing us the numbers. But there's so much diagnosis going on right now, which is 100% needed. Again, so hear me correct here. But I think when you're constantly swimming in diagnoses, you get constant how do you pronounce that? Problematization.
Yeah, sure.
Problematizing. No, problematizing. I was like, that's not a word. Problematizing. I think then you get constant problematizing. And I think when you're constantly sort of marinating in that, it ensures that a lot of your response and honestly, response is going to actually take a while, but a lot of your ideas and your ideation around what could a response be, I think it cuts down on the imagination and the innovation that actually could be there. I think when you're a bit more alarmed, sad, frustrated, when you're actually trying to figure out how to solve these issues, and again, all of those like emotions and when you see these numbers and you think about these things and you think about the stuff that got us here and the why, yes, of course they're upsetting. But when we're constantly marinating in that, I think it just means that we just have a far more dour attitude towards all of this. And that it reflects a lot in how we respond and our posture. And again, like you were saying, people are watching us and observing us. And it's kind of like if we're constantly talking about how everything's on the decline and Christianity is on its way out, people will take you at your word. And when you're then at the point where maybe you're in the lowest part of the valley and you're starting to try to build your way out, it makes it even harder to build your way out. And so that's just an observation as well with all of this. That's not particular to this book and this contribution to the conversation, but to the holistic picture of like the last several years, especially running alongside all the conversations around how very political our lives have gotten and the various social mores that we used to be able to count on have gone away as well. And the just absolute rapid transformation of technology and access to information, and the pandemic affecting how we are meeting one another face to face, like the physicality of our lives, not just like the emotional and mental aspect of what the pandemic did to us all and the folks that were lost to it and things like that. So throw that idea out there. Definitely something I'm ruminating on.
Yeah, so maybe just a good way to wrap up this episode is, so I do think the Great Dechurching is a constructive, contribution to this conversation. I'd also point people, our guy Ray Chang is doing really wonderful work with Fuller's 10 by 10 project effort that I think is sort of positively, proactively trying to respond to this moment with reaching young people with the gospel. I think the work that the Pine Tops Foundation has contributed to this conversation. You could look up the Pine Tops Foundation report, The Great Opportunity, and that's I just love that they named it The Great Opportunity. I think that's what it is at the end of the day, and Pine Tops is pursuing positive contributions in this area. Our friend Lisa Fields and what she's doing at Jude 3. Jude 3 just had another successful conference, and I just think they're wonderful as an apologetics organization. I think Lisa's an incredible leader, and so there are folks who are, I think, see the challenge ahead of us, see the opportunity ahead of us, and are sort of proactively acting and leading. And I think that gives me a ton of hope that there are people who care about the gospel, care about their neighbors, and are thinking creatively about how to do ministry in what is, in the history of America, a unique situation, a unique landscape. I think I'll just close by saying, like, that excites me. That it excites me to be living in a moment like this, where, for the first time, we're going to be seeing a generation in which you massive numbers can be presented with the gospel for the first time, because they're growing up in dechurch families. So yeah, Melissa, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I guess that just the last thing that I would say, and Michael, I know for a fact you would agree with this because you often say this with politics, and I'll say this to the even broader the context of the American church, that basically Jesus sees everything the American church is going through, and he's not daunted by it. And like you're saying, this emphasis on opportunity and the hope that you can have and the things that we're already seeing, Jesus sees them too, and isn't intimidated, isn't daunted, doesn't think everything is lost. And so I think that generally, if we put ourselves in that similar posture, then I think that a lot of fruit will come out of a posture like that.
Yeah. All right, friends, that's all we have for this episode of Where We Are. Thanks for listening. Would encourage you to go to ccpubliclife.org and register for the Good of the Public Summit. We'll be talking about these issues. Ryan Burge will be at the summit talking about his data, talking about what he's seeing. We're going to have a number of conversations that impinge directly on this topic. We'd love for you to join us in Washington, D.C., November 6th and 7th. Again, you could learn about the summit at ccpubliclife.org and plan your travel now. And as always, we'd love for you to join us at whereweare.substack.com and sign up for the newsletter, support the podcast, all that good stuff. All right, friends. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Hope you enjoy seeing the Buffalo Bills play finally. And we'll talk to you next week. This has been Where We Are.
Bye.
It's the end of the weekend, but I still wanna turn up. Yeah, I still wanna turn up.